Hi, this is Dr. Fox. Let's talk about the pharynx. In this video, we'll discuss the structure of the pharynx, its subdivision, contents, and innervation. So the pharynx is a vital part of the aerodigestive pathway, meaning that it includes pathways for both the respiratory and digestive systems. Colloquially, we would refer to this as the throat. There are three subdivisions to the pharynx. There is the nasopharynx, which is contiguous with the nasal cavity, the oropharynx, which is contiguous with the oral cavity, and the laryngopharynx, which is contiguous with the larynx. Now let's take a look at each of those areas and their contents. So the nasopharynx is posterior to the choana and superior to the soft palate. It contains a few interesting structures. So on the roof of the nasopharynx, there is the pharyngeal tonsil. So it's a collection of lymphatic tissue. The pharyngeal tonsil is oftentimes referred to as the adenoid. So if you've had your adenoid removed, this is where it was removed from. In our population of donors, the pharyngeal tonsil has involuted, so you won't be able to see it. Also present is a pharyngotympanic tube, also known as the auditory tube or the eustachian tube as the eponym. That pharyngotympanic tube is a passageway between the nasopharynx and the middle ear. So you can equilibrate your air pressure of the middle ear through your nasopharynx. In association with the pharyngotympanic tube opening, we also have some tubal tonsils or collections of lymphatic tissue that are adjacent to this opening. Now, as we move inferior to that soft palate, we are going to enter a space known as the oropharynx. So the oropharynx is contiguous with the oral cavity. Its anterior border here is the palatoglossal fold, so it's the palatoglossus muscle invested with mucosa. Posterior to that palatoglossal fold, we have the palatine tonsillar fossa, which is where the palatine tonsils are located if they are present. These are also collections of lymphatic tissue. In association with the posterior third of the tongue within, or the pharyngeal portion of the tongue, we have a region known as the root of the tongue. And that root of the tongue is covered by rugose lymphatic tissue, and this is known as the lingual tonsil. Just posterior to the root of the tongue, we have the epiglottic valleculae. So this is an outline of the epiglottis, and so there are scoops here of space that can collect saliva. So these act as salivary traps so that you're not activating the deglutition or swallowing reflex by saliva constantly moving into the remainder of the pharynx. These are very good anatomical landmarks for laryngoscopy, in particular when one uses a laryngoscope with a Macintosh blade. So that Macintosh blade can rest within that epiglottic vallecula, and the tongue can be drawn anteriorly so that one may visualize the inside of the larynx. Also within the oral cavity is the uvula. So that is that little dangling structure that one might see if they look in their oral cavity or through their oral cavity into their oropharynx in the back of their throat. That uvula can raise or lower in accordance with its muscular constituents. Now let's take a look at the laryngopharynx. This is a posterior view of the pharynx. So the posterior wall of the pharynx has been incised and removed. We can see the larynx here, and we can see a piriform recess. So that would be the space between the wall of the larynx and the remainder of the thyroid cartilage. This is an important place to consider because that piriform recess is a common location where small bits of food or even pills may get stuck if there isn't enough saliva or moisture to wash those items down. Washing them down would continue their path from the laryngopharynx into the esophagus. Now, recall that this is the aerodigestive pathway, so that's the way that foodstuffs or beverages may pass. But any gases, so anything destined for the respiratory system, is going to enter the laryngeal inlet. So that is going to be the proximal part of the dedicated respiratory pathway through the larynx and the trachea down to the conductive pathways of the lungs. Now, the walls of the pharynx consist of layers of muscle. We refer to these as pharyngeal muscles. There are two types of pharyngeal muscles. Pharyngeal constrictors, so there are three pairs of them. There's a superior that is associated with the skull, a middle, which is associated with the hyoid bone, and an inferior pharyngeal constrictor, which is associated with the larynx. These stack upon one after the other like nesting cups, and when they constrict, they serially constrict to push items distally through the pharynx. There are also longitudinal muscles. These tend to be a little deeper, so they consist of the stylopharyngeus, so from the styloid process down to the pharynx, the salpingopharyngeus, so from the salpinx, so that's the area adjacent to the opening of the pharyngotympanic tube, and the palatopharyngeus muscle, so from the soft palate down to the pharynx. These longitudinal muscles, when they constrict, they're going to shorten and widen the pharynx by elevating the larynx. All of these muscles are controlled by the pharyngeal plexus. This is a neural plexus that innervates not just the muscular walls of the pharynx, but also the mucosa of the pharynx. Its constituents include the glossopharyngeal nerve, cranial nerve 9, the vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10, and branches from the superior cervical ganglia of the sympathetic trunk. Now let's take a look at what each of these constituencies will do. So the glossopharyngeal nerves, or cranial nerves 9, are going to exit the internal jugular foramina, and they are going to move down along the stylopharyngeus muscles, where they will participate in the pharyngeal plexus. Glossopharyngeal nerves are the major somatic sensory or afferent fibers from the pharynx. They carry back all of the sensory information with the exception of information from the nasopharynx. That's served by branches of V2, which we'll talk about later. The vagus nerves are the major motor drivers of the pharynx. The vagus nerves are also going to exit through the jugular foramen and participate in that pharyngeal plexus. So not only are they the major motor fibers, but they are also the providers of the visceral motor fibers, or the parasympathetic to the mucosa of the pharynx as well. Now, the vagus nerves innervate all of the pharyngeal muscles as well as most of the muscles of the soft palate. The exception to the innervation of most of the muscles of the pharynx are the stylopharyngeus muscles, which are innervated by the glossopharyngeal nerve. Now, the superior cervical ganglia will send fibers to the pharyngeal plexus, and these are going to be vasomotor. So they are going to be the sympathetic fibers to any of the smooth muscle of the vasculature of the pharynx. And when they are excited, they will cause the smooth muscle of the vasculature to constrict so as to limit the blood flow. So this pharyngeal neural plexus will serve most of the muscles of the pharynx, as well as the soft palate, as well as the mucosa of the pharynx as well. The pharyngeal plexus is what modulates the gag reflex or the pharyngeal reflex, and that might be something that you've experienced if something has inadvertently touched your oropharynx. Usually it results in someone going, "Ugh," which is a precursor to emesis or vomiting. So those sensory fibers from the glossopharyngeal nerve go up to the brain, where the brain goes, uh-oh, we better not let that material through, which activates the vagus nerve so as to help expel any of the materials in the pharynx. So we've discussed the pharynx as a space, its subdivision, the important structures within each subdivision, and discussed the pharyngeal neural plexus and its constituents. This is your summary slide. Thank you for your time.